We stand in the middle of infinity between outer and inner space. And there's no limit to either.
I'm in here, inside you, inside your body.
Oh God. Somebody help me! I'm possessed!
Welcome to Journey Through Sci-Fi, where we journey through the many subgenres of science fiction on screen. I'm James.
And I'm Matt, and this series we're exploring the sci-fi subgenre of mad science, and in today's episode we will be looking at Fantastic Voyage from 1966 and Innerspace from 1987.
Just a little episode, just a little tiny miniaturized episode today.
Yeah, returning to the concept of miniaturization, we've watched a few mad science movies about people shrinking down to a tiny, tiny size. But this is our first one going into the human body while shrunk down, and both of today's films dealing with that concept. One being, the latter one being kind of a homage, not a remake, but heavily inspired by the former.
Inspired, ripped off, depending on how you view it, I reckon. Yeah, and it's miniaturization in a different way to how we looked at before. Last time, people were being shrunk down, but in this, they're being shrunk down, like you say, stuck in people's bodies, and there's something just gross about that as well.
Yeah, and a little bit separate, but key to both films is they've got their own little ship that they're going to float around the body in that's also getting shrunk down with them. So they have a little vehicle that's also getting shrunk.
Yeah, little tiny vehicles. It's like the Thunderbirds, but if the Thunderbirds were going inside somebody's body.
And they would if they had to.
They would. They definitely would. But unfortunately, there's no marionette puppets in this. Well, there's a little bit of puppetry here.
A bit of marionette action, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit here and there, especially in Fantastic Voyage. But we will get into that as we discuss these two films today on the podcast.
Let's start with Fantastic Voyage from 1966 then, James.
Well, the only way we can reach that clot is from inside the brain. So we've decided to put a surgical team and crew into a submarine, reduce it way down in size, and inject it into an artery.
You mean I'm going along?
As part of the crew, yes.
Directed by Richard Fleischer, from a story by Jerome Bixby. David Duncan, Otto Clement, often misrepresented as adapted from an Isaac Asimov book, but he did write a novelization, and it did come out before the movie, but not his original idea.
Yes, this was an interesting little fact that we found out when we were looking up stuff about the film. So what happened then? Isaac Asimov made a book. He wrote a book, but it came out before the film was released.
Yeah, just a paid gig for Asimov, I think. And just due to production schedules or whatever, it came out quite a long time before the movie. So naturally, I think people thought that this was a movie based on that book. So he must have just worked with them on the script, well in advance. Maybe even I doubt he would have seen a cut of the film 6 months before, back in the 60s. But working closely with the script and then writing a novelization based on that.
And I imagine if Asimov was involved, he would have looked at it from a scientific standpoint as well, trying to be as accurate as possible. But I don't know how accurate this kind of story can ever be, because it's quite it's called Fantastic Voyage. It's fantastical, isn't it?
Well, I think Asimov looked down his nose a little bit, and he had to be cajoled, possibly with a big fat check from the publisher, that it was a good idea to write a novelization of this, because I think he was a bit like, miniaturization, don't really like that. It's not a believable sci-fi concept to him.
But I like it as a sci-fi concept, and I think it's from watching both of these films when I was younger. Obviously this, and probably more Innerspace, if I'm honest, because that was a regular TV film. I feel like Fantastic Voyage and Innerspace were always on TV, over here in the UK at least. But I think I'm probably more familiar with Innerspace. But it's a great concept, if you ask me. I think it's an exciting one. Although Fantastic Voyage wasn't as exciting as I remember it being.
It's pretty amazing visually.
Yeah, visually.
But there's something quite 60s, 70s sci-fi. It's a slow-paced Cold War sci-fi, actually, isn't it? But it does build up the tension. It reaches a very satisfying ending, and there is plenty of action, but maybe less action. I mean, certainly less action than Innerspace. And I think the difference being that the guy they're in is sedated on a table, outside where the action is. So there's only action on one level, and the only action you get in the room is the kind of like mopping of brows and the sort of tension acted out by the military and medical staff. And even at one point, they can't even make a sound because it could damage the eardrums or whatever, which does ramp up the tension in one sense, but compare it to the kind of dynamic action that's going on outside the body in Innerspace, and it does create a differently paced movie.
Yeah, because like you say, it's made during this sort of Cold War period still, where in the middle of the swinging 60s, so all of that stuff is happening, and there's a sort of optimism around science at this point, but there is also that kind of nuclear threat that has been so much in people's mindsets for the past few years. And this is kind of like, it's an interesting one because you've got those kind of dual things going on, and it does start off with this kind of espionage, political intrigue stuff going on, and it begins with an assassination attempt, doesn't it?
Yeah, exciting. And very 60s 70s kind of spy movie action scene, isn't it? Just I don't think there's any dialogue, is there? Just a man getting off of a plane, and then he's bundled into a car. There's an attempt made on his life, and we don't really have any context of what's going on. That's the introduction to it, which is quite cool, and it has that kind of espionage movie feeling to it, which does, I think, carry on throughout the whole film as well. There's this lingering threat that someone is a spy, even on the mission, or possibly even on the submarine. They don't know. There's this suspicion that someone is going to continue to try and assassinate Benesh. Is that his name, the patient?
Yeah, and all that stuff at the beginning, it does start with this quite action-orientated stuff. And all that stuff at the beginning, it does begin quite like high-paced action, like the assassination attempts. But then straight after that, I feel like they spent a long time doing the miniaturization itself. I was watching it, and I feel like it was about 20 minutes of them just putting them into a syringe and shrinking them down and then getting them inside the body. And I think I've only ever seen this film like part way through, because a lot of that introduction stuff I just did not remember. So I was just waiting for the exciting trip inside the body. So I felt like it had a lot of build up prior to that. But I think it is the first film of its kind in this respect, because it is the first miniaturization into somebody's body. It is that Fantastic Voyage. So I think that element of it means that audiences at the time would have been like, oh, what's going to happen? Like, how are they going to do this? How's it all going to work? So they were probably thinking about it in a different way to us now, because now we're more familiar with this sci-fi concept. So it feels like we just want to see the next bit.
Maybe, yeah. It's almost halfway into the film's runtime when they actually go into Benesh's body. But I think that they're still doing a lot of fun stuff in the build up to that. There's like prep for the mission scenes, so it's very reminiscent of like space race kind of iconography. They get suited up, they're going down tunnels that are lit in a kind of psychedelic way, which isn't I'm sure probably not what NASA was doing, but it looks cool. It makes for a nice build up to that mission, this really important mission that they have to go on.
The command deck was a really nice touch, like all of that set dressing for that. You've got this doctor's surgery in one room, and it looks very sterile, and then the room over is it is like Houston. It's that kind of space deck, isn't it? They've got that big diagram of the human body. It looks a bit like Operation, but without all of the cartoon graphics on it. Just they can track where the ship is going inside the body.
Yeah, I've actually never seen this film before. I was quite surprised to see that they start in the neck and they never get further than the eye. They're only sort of covering about less than 1 foot of distance in real terms.
They have to go through the heart, don't they?
Oh yeah, but that's not the plan, is it?
That's
when things are going awry. But the original plan that Donald Pleasance is explaining with that big diagram, he's like, they're just going to go in the neck, travel up to where the blood clot is, deal with it, and come back out the neck, I think. But everything goes to shit, obviously. But yeah, just the scale of it is they're planning to cover so little distance. That's the actual plan that they've set out.
I like the premise of this as well, the fact that they have to go inside his body to save his life. But again, it's a little bit thin, isn't it? Because there's no way to undo this blood clot surgically. So they have to be doing this on a microscopic level in order to fix this guy, Beness.
Yeah, there's an enormous suspension of disbelief, isn't there? That the guy who invented miniaturization happens to get injured in just such a way that cannot be fixed by any external surgery and can only be fixed by surgery conducted by other experts in miniaturization and medicine being shrunken and put inside him. What a coincidence.
Yeah. The crew's quite an interesting one as well, isn't it? The crew that's making up this ship, the ship being the Proteus. So who have we got in the crew for the Proteus then?
So we've got our hunky hero, Grant.
Always a hunky hero.
Who is a proper 1960s All-American military hero in the sense that, like, he is involved in this situation prior to the miniaturization concept. Like, he's Benish's, like, handler or whatever for him to defect to the West. But, you know, the mission changes. It becomes a mission of miniaturization, and he just gets roped in by this senior military official who's just like, yeah, we just need you to go on this miniaturization job. We've got a bunch of specialists in, but you're the only person I trust. So, sorry. And he's like, we're going to be back for dinner. You know, he's just like takes it all completely in stride, even though it's the most insane thing he's presumably ever heard of. So yeah, we got Grant as our hero.
He's making all the wisecracks as well, isn't he? Like when they go into the sterilization booth, he says stuff like, "Oh wow, guess I'm not having those kids" or something like that, doesn't he? There's lines like that in this, and he's just like these little like quips and kind of asides to the audience almost that he's bringing along. It's an interesting added part of his character.
Yeah, and then we have I can't remember the name, the main doctor, the kind of lead doctor who will do the laser surgery, and his beautiful assistant Cora, played by Raquel Welch. Is it Dr. Duval? Is that his name?
That sounds familiar to me. Again, there's like we should be able to remember all the names of the characters in this. It's only a small group, but you're so in awe of the spectacle of what's going on. I think you do kind of go like, oh, that's Dr. 1, that's Dr. 2, that's the doctor who's going to double cross them at some point, Donald Pleasance.
I mean, he is going to double cross them. I didn't know. I hadn't seen the film before, but there's something about Donald Pleasance's screen presence. Say that 5 times fast. But you know something's up. Just like, there could be a traitor amongst us. It could be anyone. It's like Snape in the first Harry Potter movie.
It's so obvious throughout the entire thing. But yeah, and then Raquel Welch's character as well. Like, she's this technical assistant for Dr. Duval, and when she has that first interaction with Grant, she's just handling this laser, and she's kind of like, I may be a woman, but I know what I'm doing, just to make that clear. And I think that was probably still something which was coming into cinema a little bit at this point. It feels like this was kind of like all on the up around about the 60s.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, it's horribly dated. I do think Raquel Welch was known for being a bit more, I don't know, having a bit more personality than other sort of sex symbols of the day. But I think it's still horribly dated, because I mean, like, lots of characters are just absolutely dumbfounded that there's a woman involved, and there's lots of comments about her age as well. Like, but I don't even understand like why they say that. It's so creepy. You know, like, oh, how long have you been working for Dr. Duval? He must have snatched you from the cradle and stuff like that. It's just like, oh, stop it, please. But she is there on her own merit. Like you say, she's like working with the equipment and like putting them in their place, kind of thing. So that is refreshing, but other elements of it just horrifically dated, I guess.
But we get all of the action when they're finally injected inside the body and they're on this mission. We know there's a traitor amongst them, but even before the traitor, Donald Pleasance, reveals himself, there's lots of things that go wrong on this voyage as well, aren't there? So, like you say, it was supposed to be a quick one. He was, like, Grant was supposed to be out for dinner straight after, but something goes wrong, and then they end up like traveling through the heart, having to go there, and then something else goes wrong, and then they lose oxygen. There's lots of sort of set piece stuff happening on the voyage, isn't there?
Yeah, and I think that's the first like really amazing set piece, is that detour to the heart that you mentioned. This, you know, the one place they absolutely must not go, it's too dangerous. And then they're like, it's the only, we've ended up in the heart, we need to go through the heart. And then, you know, I was saying that there wasn't much action on the outside, but they are brought into the plot, aren't they? The doctors and military staff outside, they have to concoct this plan to stop the heart for just 52 seconds or something, 58 seconds, less than a minute. They're able to safely stop his heart without him dying, just to allow them to pass through. So we do get some nice kind of action in both worlds happening at the same time, which I think makes the whole thing feel a bit more dynamic and exciting when it's complementary. And even I was kind of, you know, I was slating everyone has to be silent, don't drop the scissors, but that was good though, wasn't it? That was tense, like all the doctors like sweating bullets.
That was the moment when they were inside the ear, wasn't it? So
yeah,
any sound would just, well, they make a sound, don't they? And you can see the repercussions on the ship, just everything starts shaking. And yeah, I think that's a really creative element of it, isn't it? Because the different parts of the body, which everybody knows, but then looking at them in this different way and imagining what it's like to travel through this system. It's something which is quite awe-inspiring in a sci-fi film of this type as well, because you are creating this kind of... Because all of the other films previously are all exploration films, right? So we're going into space and we're doing that. This is a completely... Well, it's charted, but it's not charted in this way. It's a different kind of space that they're going through. Innerspace.
Innerspace. They say Innerspace quite a few times.
They do,
yeah. Yeah, but they make it interesting and they make it feel like an alien world, don't they? It's got this really psychedelic production design. Everything looks
60s.
Everything looks a bit like a lava lamp, doesn't it? But I think they also do address that in the dialogue a little bit at the start, don't they? I think there's a line about how, I thought everything would be red when they're in a blood vessel, and someone else says that's just the red blood cells, you know, everything else is differently coloured. You know, you primarily just see the red blood cells, which I thought was nice because that sounds correct. I mean, you know, you have the red blood cells and then there's other liquids in your blood, isn't there? So that sounded quite scientific. It fooled me at least.
Yeah.
But then it allows scope for the film to look more psychedelic and not just have all of this, not just have them swimming in a sea of blood, you know, for 90 minutes, which wouldn't go over so well. But allows all these like alien worlds and like the seaweedy bit, you know, where they're getting all stuff like clogged on the ship, which again is explained as something biological, but it doesn't matter, does it? It's just like it allows you to create an alien world out of the inside of the human body.
And it got me thinking about how scientists might view the world in a slightly different way, because this is our mad science series. You've got to think about the sort of science aspect of it. So the ability to like visualize these things in a way that other people can't is quite an interesting part of this film, isn't it? Because like you say, they're doing it with the psychedelic sort of spaces and the settings that they're traveling through. But then I would imagine that obviously scientists think in that way where they look at the minutiae of things. They're looking at particles, they're looking at how things work. So it's like that scene in Oppenheimer when he's imagining all of these like equations and he's seeing stuff in his head. And I sort of like, that's sort of the romanticized view I have of scientists thinking these things through, and they're discovering these things about the body and about how things work, just creating this kind of world, this really detailed fantasy-esque kind of vision.
Yeah, I wonder how this went over with, you know, surgeons and microbiologists and professionals working in this field that were interested in, you know, the details of the inside of the human body. And I'm sure even at the time it was probably like, oh, it's not very accurate or whatever. But still, you know, if you're into that, it's going to chime with you as a piece of entertainment.
But also it's just a much more fun way of explaining stuff. Like, can you imagine if you're a kid and you're in a science class? And I know this isn't scientifically accurate in lots of ways, this film, from what I can gather, but if they're explaining stuff like the lymphatic system and reticular fibers, and then show the scenes from this where reticular fibers are clogging up the submarine engine, all that kind of stuff, then it's just more, oh wow, this is really like interesting now. I can see this, I can picture it, I've got an image of it in my head.
Yeah, and like the depiction of the antibodies in this movie is not a million miles away from like how I was taught about white blood cells when I was in school. Although I think antibodies and white blood cells are two completely different things. But, still, in terms of visualizing the concept of the like engulfing something in order to protect the rest of the body, and then I can't remember how white blood cells work, destroy the thing or remove the thing, whatever. But still, the depiction of this was, not a million miles away from like animations that we were shown in like year 9, that sort of time of teaching it to kids. So I appreciated that. You say it's not educational. It's probably not. I mean, it's not the goal of the film to be an educational piece of media, but it works. I'm sure many children were inspired to sort of study in sciences and biology having seen this film as kids.
And it's interesting that Richard Fleischer, the director, had such a fascination with medicine and the human anatomy as well, because he studied it in college apparently, and he was gonna sort of go down that path before becoming a movie director. So I think having someone like him direct a film like this is like a bit serendipitous in a lot of ways, because you've got someone who actually has an interest in this kind of stuff, who is a legitimate movie director taking this particular film on board.
And he's got good sci-fi credentials as well, hasn't he? He's going to go on after this to direct Soylent Green that we talked about a few series ago, and he also directed 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So big. He's no stranger to this kind of like fantastical, amazing looking filmmaking. He's a great choice to make this movie.
He likes a good voyage film, doesn't he? Like pick some sort of ship and then have it traveling somewhere underwater in some sort of way, which is exactly what's happening in this. He's the ship in water guy or ship in blood guy.
Yeah. Yeah, because they do call it, they refer to it as a submarine, don't they? The vehicle that they're taking, the Proteus. It's a sub. I think they might do that in Innerspace as well. And I suppose it is. But it's not in marine landscapes. It is in arteries and veins.
Did you read about the story from Mike Myers?
No.
So apparently he'd proposed at one point to do a spoof of this called Shagtastic Voyage. And then,
with Austin Powers.
Yeah, with Austin Powers. And the premise was that Austin Powers would be injected into Dr. Evil's body.
I mean, I have to say that sounds like it would make an absolutely brilliant Austin Powers sequel.
I would love to see that.
Yeah.
But it goes to show like how many iterations of this have been in people's minds as well, because we'll go on to Innerspace in a little bit, but that kind of, this has really captured people's imaginations, hasn't it?
So you said that you watched this a lot when you were a kid. I missed this one. What are the things that stick out to you? I mean, you were just saying that you can't remember like the first half of the movie. So obviously that wasn't the stuff that little James was enjoying, but like what was standing out for you when you were a kid? And is it the same now?
Well, I spent the whole film waiting for the bit when they get the suits on and swim around in the body. I was waiting for that to happen, and there's a few elements of that happening in this film, but I remember all of that and just the drama of that and the ship having some sort of malfunction. I think that happens a couple of times again in this film. It's very much like a stop-start, we've got to finish the mission, but will we have enough time? And the 60-minute timer on this as well, because if they don't get out in that time, then they're going to enlarge, aren't they?
Yeah, almost real time. The sort of second part of the film takes place in, just slightly trimmed down for brevity. But yeah, that's great. And then getting distracted by the little set pieces, like needing to refill the oxygen by the lungs and stuff like that, to ratchet up the tension, because there's an hour on the clock. That is cool.
And having various crew members get into sticky predicaments, either getting clogged up by these antibodies and being stuck by those, or accidentally flying around the body because of some sort of intake of breath when they're out in the lungs. All of that is really like it's fun stuff in the film, and it adds a bit of drama.
Yeah. I liked all of that. I liked the set pieces. I liked it. I liked that feeling of, you said like it's stop start, but I liked that you kind of know when you're like approaching a set piece. It's like, oh, there's the heart, there's the ventricle, we're near the ear. It's kind of like they kind of announce where they're going, and then it's like, right, we're going to like pause for a minute and like have a poke around and something's going to happen here. I like that, the way the film is structured around those set pieces. I think it's great. And I particularly like that every location just has its own set design. It's all kind of within a bit of a psychedelic framework that's all roughly similar. But like I said before, we get into like a seaweed place at one point, and everything is kind of explained. I particularly like when we finally get into the brain, and it's this sort of shimmering, glittering, crystalline place.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. I thought it was just very evocative of like what you feel like the inside of a brain should look like, and more interesting than like a pink gooey mess or whatever. It's just more conceptually interesting, I thought.
Yeah, it's kind of like synapses firing and all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you've got that kind of stuff in the visuals as well.
And did they know that synapses fired signals in 1966? I don't know how, when that sort of concept would have come about, but you're right, that's exactly what it looks like. Even if that's not something that was known about, and by design it's such a sort of perfect representation of the mind that you can project that kind of interpretation onto it very easily. Exactly.
It's iconic in this kind of representation in this. And even the models as well. The models are so intricate. So they've got... So the set of the Proteus was a full-size set piece, which measured 42 feet in length. So that was the actual life-size version of the Proteus that they had. And they had different sections which could come out so they could get cameras and the crew in. All of this stuff was really important for making sure those interior scenes looked intimate and tight. And then on top of that, they've got all of these different scale models of the Proteus itself. So they had a 5-foot-long miniature of the submarine used for the interior shots, and then they had a tiny 18-inch model for scenes depicting the sub bursting through stuff like the arterial walls and all that kind of stuff. And you said so marionettes and things like that. Were there any moments where you thought, oh, they've stuck in like a Thunderbird model here?
No, but I was kind of referring to, there's marionette movement. There's a lot of wire work, isn't there? And that's kind of like, making a human actor into a marionette. I was quite confused about it. It took me a few scenes to actually sort of realize what they were doing, because, I just thought they would have filmed it underwater because there's lots of swimming scenes, but I don't know if that was just too technologically difficult at the time. So it's actually, they are swimming through the air. It wasn't until I think I saw someone land and I was like, oh, he's not underwater. he's floating through the air. But yeah, they hoist them up like marionettes and then, swim them around inside the body.
And they did it so well as well, didn't they? So it even won an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects and another for Best Production Design. So
definitely.
Of the era, 1966, when this came out, this is all top of the line production. And it still looks great when you look at it now. Obviously it has aged, but there's obviously something which captured my imagination when I watched it as a kid, and I think it still has elements of that now, like talking about the crystalline stuff with the brain and all of that, and each part of the body looks like a different place. It looks like it's a different surrounding, it's a different space, it's got its own it's like when you've got a fantasy film and they do we go through the woods and then we go through the desert. With this.
Like Barbarella.
Yeah, it's exactly that. They've got these kind of different zones that they're going through.
Yeah, it totally is that. And I think embracing the psychedelia of it is what makes it more timeless. I think that there's absolutely there's no barrier to entry with the kind of how realistic it may or may not be, because I don't think it's attempting to be that realistic. It's really embracing a psychedelic kind of look. And then they explain why things look the way they do. Like, oh, these are blood cells, these are antibodies. It sort of explains them, but it doesn't matter that they don't look like what they would maybe look like in a biology textbook, I guess is what I'm saying. It's fun to look at, and that's why you get nominated for an Oscar for it.
So where do they go in the film? They go into the ear, they go into the heart, they go into the brain. And when they get into the brain, they use the special laser to get rid of the blood clot. And that's about it, isn't it, in terms of where they visit?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's, they just don't go very far. The trip down to the heart is by surprise, and they certainly don't go anywhere south of there. They just keep it all that. I really liked, in fact, the tracking system they have. They've got a little grid of like tiny radar dishes.
Oh,
that they've
yeah,
got
the
over
radar
Vanessa's
dishes.
head, so they can keep an eye on them. And obviously, that's designed. It only goes to his shoulders because that's the kind of area of operation that they're working in. It's a very rushed. You're talking about the ending. It's a very rushed ending, though. I'm glad we got like a proper climax at the end. It does actually build up to a climax, but like so many of these older sci-fi films, it's just kind of like they just bust out and shake hands, and it's the end of the story.
But I mean, before that, you do get Donald Pleasance's great death in the film, don't you? Like seeing his like head get engulfed by the antibody. That is like a real moment, isn't it?
He gets what's coming to him, I suppose.
But also, like, again, I think the things which I really like about this film are the sort of the fantasy elements of it, where it is this visual spectacle that you're seeing in the film. But I think the Cold War espionage element of it, I think that's where I just like it's more personal preference than anything. I wasn't as into that kind of stuff. And they've got other stuff there which sort of connects to the Cold War as well, don't they? Where they've got the sub is nuclear powered, and they've got like a tiny little nuclear particle or something, haven't they?
Wait, yeah, they can't shrink that, I think, because it's radioactive, which is like not very well explained. But because they can't shrink it, once they get inside, it'll be a lot bigger, so big enough to power the
Yeah,
ship.
so they like shrink it to a certain size, and then it's complicated. Well, it's probably less complicated than we're making it out, but yeah, there's something about shrinking some nuclear power and making it power the ship. So they're in a nuclear sub inside someone's body, which isn't something you really want floating around in you, is it?
Yeah.
Despite the fact the nuclear substance is very, very tiny, still, I don't think that's really good for you in general.
Yeah, I think all the Cold War stuff is a bit of a sideshow to the plot, or even, I mean, the plot is like a sideshow within the universe of the film, isn't it? Like, you've got this competition with the Soviets over the militarization technology. That's the source of the tension of the film and why we have to go on this fantastic voyage. But the fantastic voyage itself is not the intended use of the technology, is it? I guess they want to miniaturize a massive army and then drop it into Moscow. I guess that's the sort of intended use of the technology. This is an improvised thing in order to save the man who knows how to do it. So everything else is just backdrop, really.
Yeah. But again, like, the film does have this legacy to it, doesn't it? It spawned a TV show for a bit. There was a TV show that happened off the back of this. It was in 1968, consisted of 17 half-hour episodes, aired on Saturday mornings on ABC TV. And there was a comic book which came out of it as well. There's other stuff that's sort of like borrowed heavily from it, Innerspace. And also there's been talks about a remake of this as well. Have you heard much about this potential remake?
Yeah, I think James Cameron has at one time been attached to remaking this, but as I understand it, he's busy on other projects at the moment, so I don't know what the status
other
of that
projects being 8,000 Avatar films for now into eternity.
When was that sort of a news story? Was that ever a realistic prospect?
I think last year it came back into the news feeds, and people,
okay.
I don't know, I think Cameron had said, if I did this, like he's been talking about it since the 80s, I think, about doing a remake of this. But I think in the 90s, obviously 97 when Titanic came out, he started getting very, very busy. And then any talk of doing a Fantastic Voyage remake kind of died out a bit. But he was talking about doing it with Guillermo del Toro. So he'd get him to direct it, and then I think Cameron would have input on it. I think that's the rumor, but who knows?
All right, yeah, they work together quite a lot. That would be cool. I mean, I slightly prefer James Cameron, but that would be cool. He is kind of a man of his word a little bit, isn't he? Like, I mean, didn't he write Avatar in like 1990 or something, and it took 17 years or however long to get onto the screen. So if he says he's interested and he keeps coming back to it, then, I wouldn't rule it out. The problem is he's, I love him to bits, but he's in his 70s now. So you can't take 17 years to make a movie, especially if you've got sort of 3 that you're currently working on before you can start with, if he wants to do it, he needs to get on with it a little bit.
Well, I'm sure he's got lots of stuff written up for it anyway, and it could be sort of a Alita Battle Angel situation where he does a bunch of writing for it and then gives it off to someone else. But who knows?
But obviously it influenced one film, possibly more than any other, James. Shall we move on to 1987's Innerspace? Hi listeners, hope you're enjoying the show. If you want to support us and get access to hundreds of hours of bonus episodes, you can sign up to our Patreon.
We've got discussions on all the latest sci-fi films in cinemas, the Bad Movie Bunker, and Patrons' Picks, as well as mini-series covering your favourite franchises.
Patrons get to have their say on what we cover, both over on Patreon and right here on the main show too.
So if you want to join, head over to patreon.com/Journey Through Sci-Fi.
Now, back to the episode.
I'm an estranged man. I'll be a son of a bitch. I'm an estranged man, surrounded by strangers in a strange room. Ozzy, what the hell have you done to me? How the hell can I be inside a man? I studied up on rabbits.
So you mentioned that you watched this one and Fantastic Voyage a lot when you were a kid. For me, it was definitely this one. I've seen this so many times. It was one of my sort of childhood favourite movies, really. Any time it was on TV, I would want to watch it.
And it's so funny. It's just, I feel like this was some light relief after watching Fantastic Voyage. As much as I liked that film, I think this is it's just so ridiculous, but they're really leaning into the ridiculous idea of it as well, because the premise itself is a silly one, isn't it? You are shrinking someone down and putting them inside someone's body to sort of like float around in a ship.
Yeah, that's a ridiculous premise, and it's the same premise as Fantastic Voyage, but it takes that premise and says, right, how do we get that shrunken character into like the wrong person? How do we concoct some kind of comedy mishap that leads to him getting injected? And it is so clunky when is it Ozzy, the scientist friend of Tuck's? He sort of stumbles injured out of a lift and just sticks it in deliberately. I think he does. He's not just doing it because he's like falling over, right? He's like, oh, it's my last ditch to inject Tuck somewhere, which is fair enough. But it's just, a ham-fisted way to get to this setup of this movie.
But it's so perfect for Martin Short's character, though, because Martin Short's character is this hypochondriac. Jack Putter is at the doctor's surgery. You see him there in one of the first scenes complaining about all the things that are wrong with him, and like he's allergic to hairspray at the beginning, and he's really worried about everything. He's very anxious. He's got a lot of anxiety and stress, and for him to get injected by some random guy in a mall at the beginning of the film, that's the perfect sort of inciting incident for his character to get past it and end up in this kind of like action thriller film that it becomes.
Yeah, and we were talking about this, we hinted at this before, it is all action all the way through, isn't it? You've got the action going on inside Jack's body with Tuck in his little submarine spaceship thing, and then you've got all the action going on outside. So what we got some gang of international criminals trying to steal the technology, and Jack has to go and recruit Lydia, Tuck's ex-girlfriend, and go on a big old chase trying to track them down and get the missing chip back. So what is it? There's 2 chips necessary, one big chip, one small chip, and you need them both, but one of them's been stolen, and that's what happens in the opening scene.
Yeah, so Tuck's like a lieutenant. He's like some sort of fighter pilot. We see him at the start. He's a bit annoyed that he's too old to fly these big fast planes anymore. He's got a ropey relationship with Lydia, played by Meg Ryan. So you've got these 2 really big Hollywood stars, and then all of this stuff happens when they're doing the experiments. And like you say, the chip to turn Tuck big again is stolen. And so they're in a tricky situation because this miniaturization technology is being stolen by someone. And how they're gonna get that back. How's Tuck gonna be turned back to normal size? All of these kind of inciting incidents happen very early on to try and progress the storyline.
And also allow an extremely colourful cast of characters outside and around Jack to be introduced to the plot as well. The cowboy,
Robert Picardo,
Scrimshaw, the doctor, Scrimshaw, I don't know his name, but the big lumbering, terrifying henchman of Scrimshaw with the robotic hand. All of these characters, absolutely brilliant and increasingly ridiculous, I suppose, as they're being introduced.
Yeah, and the thing which is different in this film than Fantastic Voyage is I feel like you get a bit more background on all the characters as well, because they have their own personalities and they're shown quite early on as to who these people are and what their backstories are. So obviously Jack being a hypochondriac, Tuck, he's got all of these issues around commitment and he's a bit jaded by not being able to be a fighter pilot anymore. And then you've got the bad guys, and like you say, Robert Picardo as the cowboy is this really sort of like cartoon character, isn't he? He's really like everything about him is overdone. He's dressed as a cowboy, but he's not American.
Singing a song about how he's not a real cowboy.
And like you said, the henchman with the robotic hand as well. And there's one scene where he switches his robotic hand for what I can only assume is some sort of vibrating dildo.
Yeah, amazing stuff.
It's different to Fantastic Voyage, isn't it?
It is different. I forgot how much crazy stuff happened to Jack and outside, because I think everything that's like in my mind, in my memories of this film, is all the internal stuff. Really, that's what actually stood out to me when I was a kid. Is Tux. This film just blew me away when I was a little kid. I thought the sci-fi elements of it were so amazing. The little pod floating around in the bloodstream and slicing a tiny hole in his heart in order to escape and then go elsewhere in Jack's body. I just absolutely loved all of that. That's the stuff that like lingers in my mind. So when we get to the kind of final set piece of the film and Scrimshaw's getting shrunk down to like half his size, I was watching that and I was just like, I don't remember any of this. Like I can't, but this is so madcap.
Yeah, because it's very, well, it's a comedy film, isn't it? You've got Martin Short doing his best comic acting, and Dennis Quaid is like a good straight man in this as well. So they make, it's basically a buddy film, isn't it? It's like a buddy cop film with this unlikely couple that's having to team up and then find a way to save the day at the end.
Yeah, it definitely is a buddy movie. And I think what's actually a real testament to, I don't know, the film, or in particular like Martin Short and Dennis Quaid's performances, is that it really feels like Jack and Tuck have great chemistry, but they are in no scenes together until the very end when Tuck is re-embiggened and they can actually meet in the real world. Like maybe they would have been reading lines together, but I think in practical terms, when you're shooting a movie like this, you're not actually going to have Dennis Quaid on set just to feed his lines to Martin Short, right? That's not financially viable, really, to pay Dennis Quaid all that time. So it's someone else, talking to Martin Short in real life. But it's completely convincing, and they do feel like this mismatched cops, like you say, in a buddy cop movie. And I think that's a testament to how good both of them are in this film.
And it's a great gig, like you say, for Dennis Quaid, because he just literally sat in this set in being the pilot of the ship for the entire film. He's not really got to do much. He's just delivering his lines. He could probably have his lines stuck up somewhere, to be honest. And whereas Martin Short's doing all this like crazy action stunt stuff, flying out
Martin
of vans.
Short's doing it all.
Yeah. So it's quite an interesting difference in their performances because of where they're stationed throughout the film. But also it's so dependent on their relationship, isn't it? And one of the interesting things I found out doing a little bit of research around it was that I think it was Chris Prouser, who was one of the guys who worked on the screenplay. He said, like, look, this is basically a Fantastic Voyage ripoff. And he was quite upfront about this when he was writing it. He was like, yeah, it's kind of like a take on that, to put it lightly. And in that original, I think it went through lots of screen rewrites as all of these kind of things do. And initially, I think the idea was, what if we shrank down Dean Martin and stuck him in Jerry Lewis? And that was kind of the idea of the pairing. And there were other, and I mean, that fits in because obviously we looked at Nutty Professor with Jerry Lewis recently and talked about Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis's like comedic double act that they had at the time. So I found that a really interesting fact whilst looking into it.
Yeah, I can see a bit of that dynamic. I think we talked about the Nutty Professor, didn't we? And I absolutely love Martin Short, and I found Jerry Lewis kind of annoying, to be honest. So I'd much rather see Martin Short kind of clowning around and doing all of this slapstick nonsense in this film.
Yeah, I think like Martin Short definitely does an amazing job at this, but it's interesting that they kind of like said, okay, what if we had this kind
That's
of
the
pairing?
model.
Yeah, this is the model. But then also during the writing development, there was one model which would have switched it. So you'd have like the tough guy having like the nerdy guy injected into him. So one other pairing, which was a potential, was having Arnold Schwarzenegger having Michael J. Fox injected into him in the vessel. And I mean, that sounds like a film I would definitely want to watch, but it completely changes the dynamic of this and spins the whole film on its head.
Yeah, and again, I think that would have worked great. I mean, that's totally Arnie. Late 80s, a bit early for Arnie to be starring in that kind of movie. But when Arnie turns to comedy,
I think he's just doing Twins, isn't he?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, well, put Danny DeVito in him then, you know. But that's Junior. But like, I can see that working as well. That'd be great, and it would be, I don't know, a bit more of an action movie. I guess the problem is like, what's Michael J. Fox contributing to the kind of external action in that pairing, like. Tuck in the movie has to coach Jack through everything, coax him into doing stuff, and then coach him into like being competent and give him the kind of inspiration he needs. Whereas obviously, I mean, Arnie would just be stomping through all the bad guys, wouldn't he? So I think that pairing, I don't know. I think that Martin Short kind of being the physical lead of the film is great.
Yeah, they definitely have to change things up quite a lot to make it work that way. But I think this is definitely the pairing which I think is ideal for this film. Like in comparison to Fantastic Voyage as well, there's lots of different ways that they're using the sort of mad science of it again, aren't they? Because in this one, Tuck, Dennis Quaid in his little Innerspace vessel, he has more tech to utilize, doesn't he? He's got this kind of electromagnetic pulse which he can emit, and he can connect into the eardrum so he can talk to Martin Short's character. There's lots more going on in terms of the use of technology.
So, sort of a ridiculous magic bag of tech that Tuck has at his disposal that certainly never bothered me when I was a kid, but watching it, I was getting a bit tired by the end of the film of everything that Tuck was able to do. I had completely forgotten that Tuck transforms Martin Short into Robert Picardo for a whole sequence of the movie. Like I love it at the start when he's like shooting a kind of hook into the back of Martin Short's eyeball in order to, create a sort of video feed that he can look out, and he does something similar with the ears. That's all great stuff. There's something, I don't know, there's just something, it feels like simple, believable tech to just like hook up to the input and feed it into your ship. It just feels like using AV equipment, right? It makes a kind of basic sense. But then Tuck being able to just kind of like stimulate the muscles in Jack's face to the extent that he turns into Robert Picardo for a limited amount of time. I just, it starts to get a little bit ridiculous towards the end.
That kind of breaks
And
it
an
a little bit.
EMP that can like destroy Jack's TV, but do no damage to Jack's body, despite it coming from Jack. I mean, I know it's just electromagnetism, but I don't think you want that emanating from your body at such extreme degrees.
Yeah, we were worried about the guy having some sort of nuclear reactor inside him in Fantastic Voyage, doing electromagnetic pulses. I think you're going to have issues with that as well. But you saying about the AV technology as well, he literally pulls out a red and a white cable at one point to plug in. And I was like, this is great.
Yeah.
This is brilliant.
Yeah. Great. That's how you get your audio in. Yeah.
Yeah. All of those kind of things. And yeah, they do take it a step too far. But I think being able to plug into the eye, plug into the ear, that is good mad science right there. And I think it makes sense in the world of the film. But yeah, they just take it a little too far. And then this idea that Martin Short, I mean, the adrenaline stuff I think works because Dennis Quaid is saying to Martin Short, okay, I'm going to boost your adrenal glands so that you will be able to fight this guy. And then he starts believing that he can do it whenever. So he kind of gets that confidence. But the whole film was about these characters. They have kind of like they do have quite a good character arc, don't they? Both of them.
Yeah, I think having a hypochondriac like actually have a microscopic invader in his body is great fun. And that's a great arc for Martin Short. And I think Martin Short, I mean, he's such a funny man. Like, he's a really, really funny performer, but I think he's also very good at, like, understanding the tone of the movie that he's in. So he can be, like, balls to the wall, crazy and funny, but he just dials it to exactly the right amount that he can be this extremely neurotic, wacky hypochondriac, and then also kind of go on this journey and have a few action scenes and for it to be believable, but he remains likable and funny. You know, it's just a brilliant performance. And yeah, you're right, he goes on this whole arc of self-discovery culminating in, I guess, when he like fights the guy on the stairs and Tuck's not actually there to help him.
But Tuck has that kind of realization that his feelings for Lydia become clearer to him, don't they? Given this kind of like life and death situation that he's in, because he could end up just dying inside Jack's body. There's a line, isn't it, that you end up with like a tiny little floating skeleton inside your body forever. And yeah. I remember that terrifying me as a kid, but listening to it again, I've kind of had that flashback to it, and I was like, oh, something gives you a bit of a shudder thinking about that.
Yeah, I suppose he also has that character arc, doesn't he? I find it less enjoyable and convincing, I think, just because Dennis Quaid is inside the pod for the whole movie. It's just a bit, like you say, it's an easy gig for Quaid, I suppose, isn't it? A bit less of a kind of convincing well, you know, he's good, but I'm less kind of invested in him as a character, I suppose.
And you've got more about the sort of like the mad science love interests in this as well, haven't you? So obviously Lydia and Tuck, they're kind of the when are they going to get back together story, aren't they? But then Jack's kind of in the midst of that as well, because he kind of has a few feelings for Lydia as well in the midst of it. But then there's Wendy, who's this random character who Jack works with, who just pops in every once in a while, looking a bit like Jem from that 80s cartoon.
And sounding like Francine from American Dad. That's Francine's voice actress.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just like seeing all of that. I think that kind of, and also just, I don't know, that ends, it's just like another weird feature in the film, having her character. But again, I suppose that shows that like Jack gets a bit more self-worth by the end of it.
It's supposed to be growth, yeah, but I thought that Wendy seemed nice.
Yeah.
I was a bit disappointed. Like he rejects her at the end, and I think it's supposed to show how much he's grown. But she seemed like a nice person. She was coming around to him. You know, they had a bit of flirtation. You know, all of that. Were we supposed to think she was like stupid or gross because she goes clubbing all the time or something?
Yeah,
and that he shouldn't be attracted to.
I think it's that, and it's more like she's done the rounds in the supermarket from the sounds of it.
So it's right, slut shaming.
Yeah, basically slut shaming her a little bit there.
Okay, again, bit dated, but I was just disappointed because she seemed like a nice lady.
Yeah, exactly.
I think he was missing out. So how does this film? So it's obviously inspired, but like what scenes specifically just recreate Fantastic Voyage, and also does it go further Does it go beyond the Fantastic Voyage into the inner space?
Well, there's certain bits in it which are references back, and we talked about the scientific inaccuracies of Fantastic Voyage earlier, but there's stuff like they say quite early on, we can't go and get oxygen from anywhere we need to because that will just change the cabin pressure, and they kind of change that, but then they have like a callback to that. They've also got all of the different places inside the body that Tuck is exploring. So all of that kind of elements in there. He gets, like, there's a syringe which puts him in the body. All of those basic
we
bits
have that.
are there.
We have that dramatic heart scene
Yep.
as well, which is almost, almost like for like, isn't it?
But they do go to extra places in this, like the moment when Tuck gets transferred over to Lydia through the saliva, and then he sees his baby inside Lydia as well. That's a really weird moment, which I remember just being sort of like, oh wow, what's going on here as a kid? And just seeing it again now, and like, that is a creepy thing. Like, I don't know how I feel about that exact moment in the film.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that there's some of the visuals in this feel more scientifically realistic. The blood cells rushing through the vessels, even the fetus, it feels a lot more realistic. But like, kind of counterbalancing that is the fact that Tuck has this almost magical mobility once inside the body, right? Like, I really like that in Fantastic Voyage, that they never go further south than the heart, and they were never even intending to go further south than the neck, because they had a brain operation to do. And even when things go wrong, they only go down to the heart and back up. Whereas Tuck can go anywhere extremely quickly. He's in Lydia's womb.
Yeah.
And then he needs to, but he got in through kissing, through the mouth. He can just go absolutely anywhere whenever he wants.
Not to be crass, but he does start off in Jack's arse, doesn't he? I think.
Yes, he does, yeah. I'm surprised they didn't do more. There's a good joke where Jack thinks he might have pissed him out. He goes to the loo and then he has to just ask if he's still there. I was a little bit surprised they didn't go more down the toilet. But
there's that whole bit when he's just talking to his genitals for ages. And he's like, yeah, and they make a whole big thing out of that. And then that guy says, don't talk to it, play with it or something.
Play with it, don't talk to it. Great advice. But the one thing that really stood out to me in this movie, in terms of like going further than Fantastic Voyage, was the stomach acid.
Yeah,
that's so cool. I remember that so clearly from when I was a kid. It's terrifying, the guy getting dissolved by the acid, and also really cool as well. And it seems like a no-brainer. Like, with a film set inside the human body, you're going to go in the blood vessels, you're going to go to the heart. You got to go to the stomach. Of course you do. The stomach acid, see it in action. It's a great location for a showdown with a bad guy as well. And even having the bad guy come in and join Tuck, that's a sort of taking things a step further than Fantastic Voyage, isn't it?
Yeah, and that kind of weird, almost Transformer jet suit that he's wearing to travel around the body. And I've just found out the henchman is called Mr. Igo.
I thought I heard like Igor or something.
Yeah, it could be Ego.
Yeah, that's what I had in my head, but I didn't want to go with Igor because I know that's not his name. But right, Igo is it? Okay.
So he's the guy.
I go inside your body.
Yeah, watch out for that guy. But he's such a menacing villain throughout, and just the idea of having the detachable hand, even when he loses the suit inside the body, he still finds a way to fuck up Tuck's day by attacking the vessel, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's terrifying. I think I was really scared of that scene when I was a little kid, but I loved it. I loved that we go to the stomach. But it got me thinking, like, what else do you do with this concept, or how many times can you do this concept? Because this is a good update and refresh of Fantastic Voyage. It feels very 80s, but it's still really fun. It's really good. I'm a big fan. And, as you were saying, like, people are influenced by it. Cameron wants to do Fantastic Voyage. Mike Myers wanted to do a parody, all of that stuff. And the concept comes up in, like, TV all the time. It's a popular sort of thing, especially in animation and stuff like that, to come to. But in terms of movies around this concept, do you think that remake would be good? And do you think there's legs in, further shrinking inside the body movies?
Well, if we think about the films which have basically done this kind of miniaturization technique, well, obviously we've done Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. We've talked about Incredible Shrinking Man, they're sort of shrinking films. Ant-Man has elements of this when he gets shrunk down to like particle size. He's not necessarily going inside people's bodies. There's some gross stuff happening in stuff like The Boys. There's people which shrink. There's one, I'm going to say this, there's one scene which anybody who's seen The Boys will know, and basically one guy shrinks so small he goes into this guy's urethra, and then he accidentally sneezes and becomes normal size again. So it's like...
So not afraid of the toilet.
Yeah, not afraid of that. So there's like
Boys.
there's bits like that. There's Osmosis Jones, which was...
Oh, I remember
yeah,
that, yeah.
so that was another one where you...
He's not shrunk, is he? He lives in the body.
Yeah, what is
Right?
it? He's like some sort of... Doesn't he control... He's like a blood cell cop or something like that.
That's it. Yeah. He's it's like the numbskull.
So that kind of feels a bit like the what's going on inside your body kind of film. Do you remember the Magic School Bus? That's kind of another...
Yeah, that's what I was trying to remember the name of that.
Yeah, that's like another sort of miniaturization thing.
But it feels like there hasn't been another big Fantastic Voyage style movie.
No,
Or maybe I've just
not for a
missed it.
long time, as far as I'm aware. Listen, if you know of any, just drop them in the comments or send us a message on social media, just so we can have a little look. Because has there been another one since these two, really, in recent years that has been specifically about somebody going on a voyage inside someone's body? And is it scientifically accurate? Could you ever do something like that with a bit more biological background, or is that just going to be boring and unfeasible?
I think it's doable. I mean, all it takes is a bit of imagination, isn't it? I just wonder if the more times you see it, you've kind of seen the set pieces that you need to see, like going through the heart valve and all of that, and stomach acid going inside the brain, all of these things. I think once you've seen them, I just wonder if that's kind of, you've had enough, you've had your fill. And maybe audiences have, and that's why we haven't done it since 1987 to this scale.
Yeah, that could be it. And also, do you think if they did a film like that nowadays, it would get the same accolades? Because, again, this one won an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, and it had Industrial Light and Magic working on it. I think they had the special effects guy who did the stuff for The Thing as well. You can tell exactly where that bit comes in. It's in the Robert Picardo head's face-changing moment.
Right. I did wonder.
Yeah,
I thought they were just blasting like a
feels
hairdryer
very
in
Total
there.
Recall as well. So
Yeah,
it's got all
yeah,
of that. But yeah, would another film get those kind of awards now? And how would they do it? I suppose it'd be all sort of green screens, and it
would be all CGI. I actually find it hard to imagine a film doing this and making it look better than Innerspace. I think Innerspace looks amazing, and I think they really perfected it with a load of practical effects. So I am skeptical that you could make a film that does this concept and makes it look better. And even, Fantastic Voyage, like I was saying, leaning into the psychedelia, like, really works in its favour, and it's made it age incredibly well. Both of these films visually have aged incredibly well, sexual politics aside in both films, but like just on visual terms, they look amazing. And I just don't think you could do it. I don't think anyone would really... Well, who else but James Cameron?
Yeah,
right?
he loves a little voyage into the unknown, doesn't he? Whether he's going into the ocean, into the depths, or inside somebody's body, maybe. Who knows? But also, just to sort of like round this out as well, we talked about how the director of Fantastic Voyage, Richard Fleischer, how he was kind of like, he was the underwater sea guy, the voyage guy. Joe Dante, if this feels like a Joe Dante film, it looks like a Joe Dante film. It's Steven Spielberg presented it as well, which kind of like gives you a bit of credibility. The last thing they'd worked on was Gremlins, so this was supposed to be the next big one from that team, but it missed the mark on the box office, I think, which is a shame. But I think since then it's gained new life for like people like you and me who've watched it since, and it's become part of our childhoods and all of that. So I think it got a second life there. But does it feel like a Joe Dante film to you, given what we've seen about Joe Dante? I mean, we've covered Explorers way back when we did our space series. Does it feel like that kind of film?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just a tremendous amount of fun. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of fun. That's what he brings to a movie, but also he can bring a lot of fun to an incredibly high concept film like Explorers, both Gremlins movies, Small Soldiers, that's his repertoire. He's extremely good at it. He hasn't directed like a ton of movies, and I suppose he's sort of toward the end of his career, I guess, or getting there, and might not have many more to be made. I think it's a shame that he didn't do more like action sci-fi stuff, although he has done a few, and I'm grateful that he did. But he can really handle the high concept stuff and make it fun and exciting. So yeah, Innerspace absolutely fits right in that middle period, right in the kind of late 80s Joe Dante period.
And as always, it's always interesting seeing how these kind of concepts in sci-fi change over time periods, like seeing where they went after the 60s film Fantastic Voyage and seeing what Joe Dante did in the late 80s to this concept. And adding the comedy, I think, really sort of makes that less of a paint-by-numbers remake of Fantastic Voyage. It adds something different, and it takes that sci-fi premise. And again, it proves that sci-fi can be so many different kinds of genres as well as being cased in science fiction.
Yeah. It's not all thought experiments, or the thought experiments can be fun.
Yeah, but sometimes you need Martin Short to be doing some crazy stuff and Dennis Quaid to be trying to talk him down off of a cliff.
I could have gone for more Quaid and Short pairings. I think they should have been the Schwarzenegger and DeVito. Well, another version of that.
That would
pairing.
be great.
It's a shame. Well, I'll tell you who else is a great pairing, mate. You and me. And if listeners want to hear more from us, you should subscribe to our show to get more episodes whenever they're released straight onto your phone. I was going to say device.
Phone device.
We're talking phones, I think,
I think most of our listeners will be on the phone. Correct us if we're wrong, though, listeners. If you're watching it on the TV or anything, watching it with just the logo because we don't video our podcast. But who knows? And if you want to find us and chat to us, we are on social media as well. We're about. We've got a few different handles. It's always at Through Sci-Fi or at Through Sci-Fi Pod. You can find us, have a chat.
If you want to support us and the show, you can leave us a 5-star review with a nice comment about us. It's quick, it's easy, it's free, but it really, really helps new listeners find the show, which is great for us.
And if you can't get enough of hearing our dulcet tones talking about science fiction, well, you're in luck. You can go over to our Patreon and find more bonus episodes over there and join up and, just have more and more content to listen to.
And if after all that you still want more from us, we will be back soon with our next episode. What we'll be talking about next time on the Mad Science series, James?
Oh, it's horny mad science. It's all getting a little bit sexy next week.
Yeah, we talked about some of the sexual politics in the films today, but we're going to really throw ourselves into the deep end with the Rocky Horror Picture Show from 1975 and Weird Science from 1985.
Yeah, I don't know how well Weird Science will have aged, let's be honest. But let's find out next time on the podcast together.
Yeah, that one's going to be a minefield. All right, join us for that, listeners. We'll be back soon.